Chapter 1. The old man met a friend. A friend he met only once. And they did a show together. They were on, I have to be careful because I can't say the key word yet. Chapter. The old man met a friend. Okay, what's going on here? Chapter 1. The old man met a friend. And he said to the friend, I had so much fun when you were online with me on Facebook Live that why don't you join the show? And you can even be my boss. So
don't say that to me, Benny.
Originally, this was going to be a show about writing. We've decided to make it a live writers workshop instead of a live writers game show. And that's the magic word. Here, I'm Benny Rizzuti. This is Brianna Gervat.
Wow, you said it right.
I had two weeks to practice. And the show is Right to Speak. Thank you for watching. We have a very exciting show. It was, we were up until the minute. Somebody was here, a friend of mine was here because she's going to have a show here.
Yes.
So we were here, and then we had someone she was going to Skype. We have a guest tonight, but I think she's going to call in. Taylor Van Arsdale, who's in California, wrote a book called Cocaine to Bane. And it's about, she'll tell us more about it later, but it's a sex, drugs, and rock and roll book. So,
yes.
Yes. And Brianna.
Yes.
Welcome to Right to Speak.
Thank you, Benny. Thanks for having me back. This has been such a pleasure.
We had so much fun, and it was the most views I ever got on the Right to Speak.
Well, hopefully we'll continue to have more views and speak to more people, and hopefully by the time that we really get around to our writers' workshop, that we can really be able to share how we came to be where we are.
Yes.
In what we're doing, and help people pick up these pens, pick up this paper, and say, I can actually do this. Yeah. Not only can I do this, but I want to do it, and I want to commit to the actual time that it takes to do it. Because it doesn't happen overnight unless you are incredibly gifted and are an insomniac.
Sometimes the ideas play out in my head, and I have the whole story there, but then putting it to paper, all of a sudden it's different. All of a sudden it doesn't always flow as smoothly as it flowed in my head.
Yeah, no, that always happens.
Right? Yeah.
Well, that's when I write, I just sit there and like you said, in your head, it comes in and you're like, oh, this is a great idea. And then sometimes it comes in and then it leaves just as quickly as it arrives, and you're like, what was that sentence? What was it that I just had the most brilliant idea? And you got to catch it before it disappears, and someone else picks it up and goes with the idea that you thought you were the only one in the world to have.
I am so glad that you brought that up, because there are stories that I call them my stories on yellow paper.
Yes.
Because if I had written them when they were in my head, right now the paper would be yellow. That's how old these stories are.
Right.
And a lot of these ideas are, I'm like, wow, I had that idea.
Yeah.
Right.
I felt the same way. I read this book it was a brilliantly written book. It was one of my favorite books that I've read in a long time. But I read it and I'm like, oh my gosh, I had the same exact idea, and she beat me to it. And it's not beating you to it. It's just a matter of, like we said before, committing to the idea that you have a story. It needs to be, you want to be the one to tell it. And you go out and you spend hours and days and maybe even years of your life doing it, because that's what it takes. It's not
as easy as,
Yeah, I was having this conversation today that, people are like, when they see people that are successful, when they see people that have achieved, New York Times bestseller status or something like that, they're like, oh man, I wish I could have done that. It's like, no, you can. You can absolutely do that. It's just, like you said a couple of weeks ago, what Hemingway said, all you need to do is sit down and bleed. And and that's what, and you don't literally have to bleed, if you don't want to be bleeding when you're writing, but metaphorically you want to pour your heart and soul out onto the page.
Yes.
And even if it's some story about who knows anything, as long as it doesn't have to be like this Pulitzer Prize winning novel, but it could be something that that maybe one person can read, and if you write it with all your heart, then there it is.
Right, and that you shouldn't think, when you're writing, you shouldn't think that, oh, this is going to be great and everybody's going to love it. No,
Yeah.
you have to love it.
Well, but you don't even have to love it. You have to just know that it's important to you.
Yes.
Because there's going to be some days that you're just like, oh gosh, why did those words come out that way on the paper when you don't? It's a love and hate relationship, because you can love it all you want, but you can't expect people to love it. You can't expect anyone to even like it. And it's just a matter of finding your voice.
Well, what did Dorothy Parker say? And I'm paraphrasing. I hate writing,
Right.
but I love having written.
Okay.
Right?
See, I love writing. Like, I love to sit there. I like to have structure. If I don't have structure, my whole day goes. I get easily distracted. I am just like, oh, look, there's a bright shining object, and I go after it. But like, if I get to sit down and really commit to doing what I want to be doing, then I get things done a lot more efficiently. So it's not, Dorothy Parker might have said that, and that's what worked for her. But for some other people, for what works for Stephen King, he shuts himself up in his room. When Roald Dahl wrote his books, he closed himself off in his house for a year. Every time he wrote a book, it was about a year that he would write and then come out with a great story,
Right.
And you have people that, you have poets that, maybe want to write a poem a day. You have other poets that are like, one poem a week is good. Or some
Right.
people can write like 6 poems a day.
Ray Bradbury had what he called Zen writing. Where
Okay.
He would just write the story down, get it on paper, and then he said he would go back to it a year later, he said.
Yeah.
He would go back to it and then do his rewrite, because then you already have the story down, and now you look at it and say, oh, all right, wait, or I forgot I wanted to add this. I wanted to add.
I don't know how he could wait a year for that.
He said a year. He actually wrote a book called Zen Writing.
Oh, yeah.
Right? It's Zen. And he told, and I said that to a professor I had. I said, not a year. He says, oh, yeah, a year. But Ray Bradbury was always writing.
Right.
So, he says that, but maybe his concept of time. But I believe that maybe he was forced for 3 or 4, because he wrote a lot of short stories.
Yes.
So 3 or 4 short stories in, and then he went back to one,
Yeah. And that's what Stephen King said too in his book, on writing as well, was that he would tuck the stories that he wrote into a drawer for 3 months and then revisit them. So like, I like to think about it as marinating. So you write it down and you create the story, you create these characters, or maybe it's a story like I wrote, like a memoir, and you're just like, okay, where do I want to take out? What do I want to add? How do I want the story to flow? So you let it marinate, you let it sit with you, and then once it sits there, then you're ready to return to it and see what's cooking, or if it's ready to be cooked.
Okay, yes.
And so, I admire those writers that are able to crank out story after story and article after article and have this one idea and be like, oh, this is what I'm going to write about. But like, I don't know, for me, it's one of those, I want to write about everything. So it's one day I write a poem, one day I write a children's book, one day, one day is like, not 24 hours for me. My day is a lot longer than
All
that.
right, but yeah, I know what you're saying.
You know what I'm saying?
So you're saying, yeah, you have, or same with me, I have things, I have a screenplay I want to write.
Yes.
I have a couple of horror stories, and I have one poem.
One
I
poem.
want to write.
Just one poem.
Well, because it's a particular poem that I know. I haven't written it all. I've written little notes about it.
Right.
But it's going to be a pretty lengthy poem, and it's actually I have another poem too that are like stories. They're poems that are stories. So
Right.
I wouldn't call it a sonnet, but it was because I have one. I'll give you the title called "The Feminine Side of Satan."
Okay.
So it's Satan in a woman.
What makes you think that Satan's a man anyway?
Oh, God, yeah, I know. Someone once had a shirt years ago that said, when God made the world, she was only joking.
Oh, that's not
Yeah,
nice. That's
yeah, but-
not a very optimistic
But
shirt.
that was one, and then I had another one called Solitary Heroes.
Okay.
Which it was going to be a short story, but I had trouble with it, and then I thought I'd rather make it a poem. And Solitary Heroes is about, it's about these people who have assassinated good people, like let's say Mark David Chapman, who
Right.
assassinated John Lennon.
Right.
And these guys became heroes in their own mind for doing something dastardly, for murder.
Yes.
You know, so you can remember David Berkowitz. You can remember these different names.
But
and
I
they
don't think
shouldn't be
anybody.
heroes.
I don't think anybody heroicizes David
No,
Berkowitz or
but
Mark David
they
Chapman.
are heroes to each other.
Yeah, but that's because I think that we can go back to what we were talking about a couple of weeks ago with this wonderful contraption that gives you access to information that you wouldn't before. You might think, oh, this is really sick and twisted. Maybe I'm the only one out there that feels that way. Now with the internet, you have this idea, well, everyone feels this way. I'm not the only one that wants to either kill John Lennon. Who was the other person? It was between John Lennon and someone else.
Oh, was someone else that
Yeah.
he wanted to?
So he
yeah.
was in Hawaii, and then he's like, oh, it's December. I feel like killing somebody. Who is it going to be? And it just so happened that he was like, I'm going to fly to New York rather than somewhere else and kill John Lennon. So it was like he wanted to.
That's how they become celebrities.
I don't think they had it in. I think they just. I have a hard time with this because the word hero, the word celebrity, we overuse it in so many ways.
Exactly, and that's what it is, like a hypocritical. The title is.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody writes. I mean, really, does anyone sit there? I mean, we can go on this whole diatribe and this whole tangent about all these so-called heroes, but I don't think anybody writes to be a hero. I think maybe a hero in their own world.
Yeah.
In terms of, okay, like for me, for writing is it's like we talked about that deadly word, cathartic. But at the same time, I write because if I do not write, I cannot breathe.
That's great, yeah.
And that to me is being, for lack of a other word, or to choose the word used, is being heroic, because in order for me to live as a decent human being in this world, I need to be able to breathe.
See, and some people don't understand that.
Right.
They don't understand that you're tossing at night, and you can't sleep at night because you didn't write what. That's how it was when I wrote Last of the Fangtooth Bastards.
Yes, you love that. I want to read that book.
You will. My son's read it. I'm like I told you. I love the story.
Right.
But I don't like the person who wrote it. I don't like the way I told it.
Right. But that's the whole thing. I think that we need
some rewrite. And there was some. All right, I'll tell you one thing about it, though. Some people have liked it. I researched it. I went to 1/5th Avenue in Manhattan.
Right.
And I told you that I went to
you
the
said that. Yeah, you
Count
went there,
Dracula
and then they were
Museum.
saying that and everything else.
So
like that. No,
then
you didn't say anything about the Dracula Museum.
Oh, that's where I went.
It was a Vlad the Impaler or Dracula? Like Dracula.
This woman, Jeannie Keys Youngson, she had in 1/5th Avenue, there was a doorman. I had to get rung in to go upstairs. She had, she set up a museum, and it was every Dracula. She had capes. She had the cape that Vincent Price wore when he played it was a different vampires.
Okay.
And at Christmas time, she would have the Drac tree, the Dracu tree, which was a Christmas tree.
Was it hung upside down?
No. She was. I was afraid at first of meeting this woman.
Okay.
I thought, this woman has and she turned out to be real sweetheart, really sweet. She was a filmmaker. She was a documentary filmmaker.
Okay.
And she won an Oscar. And then I looked it up. She had an Oscar in the museum.
Right.
And she won it for a documentary she made about a transgender.
Okay.
About one of
so
the
anyway,
early.
So you went there and you went to do research.
And I went to. She said, "Tell me about your book."
Okay.
So I told her about it, and I told her that vampire stories are a chocolate cake. That's what it is, because there's so much vampire.
Yes.
There's a chocolate cake, but it's how you make your cake, how you present it, what kind of icing you put. And then I had written, because I told you it's vampire hunters, the freeform stuff was journal entries that seemed to just come at me, and they were journal entries written in the 17th, the different centuries. So I read her that. She said, "Tell me about it." I told her about the story, and then I read her some of that. So she invited me back for the Christmas with the Dracu tree.
That's cool.
And there were actual vampire authors. Yeah, when I got there, she showed me different books too that were out at the time. Because there's like American Vampire. You can always find vampire lore books at that time in the late 80s, early 90s.
There's still a lot of vampire. I mean,
but I'm not talking about.
I'm not gonna lie,
not
like
fiction. I'm talking about nonfiction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's still a vampire craze. I mean, the thing is that like there's so many. If you do other research, not just like about okay, I'm writing the story, because when we write stories, you want to do research. You want to say okay, like you want to have a leg to stand on. Yes. Unless you're doing even with sci-fi, do your research. Read the people who have been very successful in the sci-fi field and be like, how did they do it? And not to copy them, because your goal is not to become next somebody. You want to be the first person. You want to be the first Benny. I want to be the first Brianna. I don't want to be the next who knows who
Kate
I might like.
Wilhelm or Nancy Kress.
Exactly.
Name a couple of science fiction.
You don't want to do that, but at the same time, like you want to do your research. But like but if you research those vampires, like there's so many different kinds of vampires. Like there are so many. There are the vampires that actually like suck blood. There's the people that there's the metaphorical vampires. There's the psychological vampires. So like
there's a Lamia, which is like a zombie vampire.
Yeah, so like I mean, like so you got to figure out where
Lamia or Lamia. I think it's a Lamia though.
Yeah, and then there's
every culture has a vampire myth.
Yeah.
And the African one is the one I really liked a lot. Was that this witch had sex with Satan?
Okay.
And her children are the vampires, and that's how the vampires started.
It totally can happen. You don't know.
But what I was getting back to then. I got married, I was writing it, and I was doing research, and my son was a baby, and I would go to bed at night. Mm-hmm. And instead of worrying about paying the bills and, raising a child, I was worried about I didn't work on this book. I didn't do any writing tonight after my job. And I locked myself into a closet. We were staying at my mother-in-law's, and she had a walk-in closet as big as this area right here. And I actually set up my desk in there and had my computer. And I also, one thing I tried to do, now it's harder I tried to always write it first longhand.
Yeah.
I like to do that.
I do the same thing. Like I'll do notes, but then I'll transition them over to longhand and then go from there. You know what I mean? Because when you're writing, you don't want to necessarily have you don't want to just sit there behind a desk or a computer. And, I'm going to also conquer the myth that all writing happens at night. I like to sleep. I love to sleep. So there are days that I stay up at night being like, oh man, I should have written this, I should have written that. But my writing happens during the day. It happens in the morning. And if it doesn't happen in the morning, it doesn't happen at all.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So no. If I don't write in the morning, then I'm not writing the whole day.
You don't get like that energy spurt at night, like?
No. My energy spurt is all during the day. I'm like a wind-up doll, so you can wind me up, and then come like 7 o'clock, I'm like this. And so, I think there's a lot of people that are like, oh, I need to write at night, so you need to be a night owl. No, you don't have to be a night owl. You're not Charles Bukowski. You're not, David Foster Wallace. Nobody has to be that way to be like, oh, I stayed up all night writing a book. God, if I stayed up all night writing a book, I wouldn't be able to have a day job. Because I would be like, you're not Ken Kesey sitting in a security little stand outside of a insane asylum. There are people that are like, okay, my child's asleep. I want to write 3 pages or something like that. If you want to write, your goal shouldn't be like, okay, I've done all this during the day. No, you need to make time for writing. I know a woman who would wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning before she went to do her other job. And until she became a full-time writer, she would set her alarm at 4 o'clock in the morning, and then she would write for 2 or 3 hours. Okay. And that's what she did every single day. So it's like, I think a lot of people have this idea, and I did the same thing up until I started reading Maria Popova on brain pickings. She was one of my greatest inspirations, that I would wait for this divine inspiration that I was like, oh my gosh, thank God my muses have finally shown up. They're here. We can write together. We can dance. But no, it doesn't work like that.
No, it doesn't.
You have to write every single day.
And don't do this partner thing where I'm not talking about collaborating. I'm talking about, yeah, I want to write, and my friend wants to write, so we'll meet at the library or something, and you will not write.
Yeah,
You will
no,
not.
I can't meet anybody at
There are people.
libraries.
I've met people at libraries that wanted to, and you wind up. They want you to read their stuff, and they don't. So
Yeah.
they don't really get it either.
No, well, like when I went to library in college, like all I did was flirt with all the cute boys that were there. So I did not get any writing done. But in the good news is that actually, and so I stopped myself from flirting at the library. Obviously, I did it everywhere else.
Yeah.
But I would stop going to the library, and I wound up going to Borders, and that's where I would flirt with Kerouac and Hemingway and
Yeah,
John
wow.
Muir and Tom Robbins. Oh my God, ladies, you want to flirt with a writer? Tom Robbins is your man, because he is the most. For me, he was probably one of the most. He had one of the most profound impacts on my writing. I will never write like him, which is a
Right.
wonderful thing. But like his writing, just to read his books and get ideas and to
Right.
be open.
Right.
She's on Skype ready to go.
Oh
Okay.
yeah. All right. Beautiful.
Wonderful.
Okay. In a few minutes, we're.
Yeah.
So, all right.
Okay.
Tom Robbins.
Yes.
Who wrote Even Cowgirls Get the Blues,
Absolutely.
right? And I read one of his books. I can't think. It was
What was it about?
it was a woman, and she did her own something with mushrooms. It was like
I mean, there's
25
all
years
of her
ago.
books are like that. But if
Yeah.
you're talking about, you're probably thinking about Still Life with Woodpecker.
No.
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 There's
there was a. It was
it's
a
not
woman.
Skinny Legs and All. It's not.
No, it's. What's the other one?
I mean, there's so many.
And then
I read them
She was
voraciously.
selling mushrooms or something, and she. I can't think of it. I own it, and
No,
it
are you
was a
thinking
long
about
time ago.
Villa Incognito? And it wasn't
No.
woman. It was a.
No. It was Tom Robbins' book.
No,
but I
no,
can't-
Villa Incognito. Tom Robbins wrote that too.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't think.
But I mean, like, yeah, if you want a good, I mean, I just love Tom Robbins.
Yeah, I haven't read him, and you brought that up.
Have you read Tibetan Peach
Any-
Pie? That's his
No.
memoir. He's talking about Tommy Rotten and how he came to be the writer that he is. And now we think he's like 87, 88 years old.
Wow.
And like he's still phenomenal and everything. So like when July rolls around, I'm always like, it's Tom Robbins' birthday. It's time to celebrate.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, so it's like find out who your influences are and let them influence you.
But like you said, don't try to be like them.
No.
But- Because like two of the people I love Ray Bradbury, as I
Yes.
mentioned, and Harlan Ellison,
Mm-hmm.
who Harlan Ellison is a first copy final draft kind of guy.
Yeah, see,
He
that's
writes
admirable.
like that. He that's the way he writes. But he'll even admit, he'll say like, I ripped something off to write to a woman. He wrote an essay to another writer because he was at the time he was inspired and he was fired up to do it. And then he said about a week later he got something back from her.
Uh-huh.
But it was better than what he wrote because she actually took the time to edit it but that's the way.
Yeah, so I mean, you just have to decide what kind of
I'm just so popular.
writing. You are so popular. I'm gonna need your autograph after this.
Oh, I
I'm
need
gonna have
yours.
to take you out to dinner and just be like, I had dinner. You guys will never guess who I had dinner with tonight. The one, the only.
Benny Rizzuti, which I actually had to change my name so people they think my name's Benny Rizzuti, but
Oh, that's not your actual name.
no, that's not my actual name.
Really? You're lying.
It's kind of
Are you not
I
lying?
don't want to
You're
make it
really
all about me.
serious?
I'm not lying. I'll tell you. I thought my name was Benny Rizzuti.
Okay.
I've told this story on the internet in the past. I thought my name was Benny Rizzuti.
Okay.
5 years old. Then I went to first grade and found out that they were calling me Benny, but on my birth certificate it was Pellegrino Rizzuti.
Really?
Yes, Pellegrino. And in my family, there are a lot of Bennys,
Okay.
but it's Pellegrino on it because Pellegrino
Is it like Benedito? Like, is it?
It's not Benito. It's not Benedito. It's not Benjamin.
It's not Benito. You're not named after Mussolini. Like.
I'm named after the patron saint of Sicily, San Pellegrino,
Okay.
who was the patron saint of
Of sparkling water.
Yes.
Absolutely. It's like
Oh,
my favorite.
I love you. I love you so much. So it was Pellegrino, and how Benny came into it, but I have no idea. But I found out because
Because you loved Elton John growing up, and you're like, Benny and the Jets.
So no, so
It's my
in
brother's least favorite song, so every time I walk into the house, no, I'm just kidding.
in first grade, I found out though that my name was on the birth certificate, and they registered me as Pellegrino,
Okay.
which was rough because
So do
I
you want
thought
me
I
to
was.
start calling you Saint Pellegrino? Like,
No.
like, is that a halo that you have underneath that?
But I am Benny. I'm Benny.
Okay.
And actually, my driver's license says Ben Pellegrino Rizzuti.
Okay.
So I'm like Benny Rizzuti.
Okay.
But yeah, it's if you went to the town where I could trace my entire family to this one town in
Okay.
Sicily, and if you
Is
were
it the source of Pellegrino?
yes,
Okay.
Pellegrino is the patron saint. He drove some evil out of that town.
Probably all the
Costa Bologna.
toxins that are in the
Yeah,
water there.
The sulfur. And
Yeah,
everything,
exactly.
He drove out Don Corleone.
Probably. Probably. It was after Etna erupted. He was like, no. I'm going to drive out all of the volcano.
So he's our patron saint, but how Benny and Pellegrino. So I have Uncle Benny, he's Pellegrino. Both of my grandfathers. So this is kind of cool. I was named after my father's father.
Okay.
But both of them are Benny and Pellegrino.
Yeah.
So I always tell everybody I'm named after both of my grandfathers.
Yeah, so why
Which is-
not?
How cool, yeah. Because
And so, like, if you write something that maybe you're not the most happy about or you want to see how it goes, you can go Pellegrino Rizzuti.
horror.
Yes.
I've decided the horror, so it will be Pellegrino, the horror stuff, because I write some pretty dark horror. And
Okay.
then if you've read me on Facebook, you know I'm light, and I have light stuff that I want to write
Yeah.
too. Fun.
So if I write something and I want it to be horror or anything, I can say I'm Benny Rizzuti. Like, that could be my pen name, and I could be like, no, Benny wrote this. You guys remember Benny, right?
Yeah, the big celebrity.
Yeah, the big celebrity. I just took his identity.
Okay, we're gonna. Well, we have Taylor Van Arsdale. She's our guest. She's Skyping us from California.
Yes.
And she wrote a book that I think we'll bring the cover up of the book called Cocaine to Bane. It's available on Amazon, as is Brianna Gervat's book.
Yes.
So this is Cocaine to Bane. That's the cover. And later on, at the end of the show, we'll bring up the cover of Brianna Gervat's book, Mosaic. And both of these, Cocaine to Bane and Mosaic, are both available at Amazon.com.
Yes, but my book doesn't have anything on cocaine, unfortunately.
Taylor, how you
Hey.
doing?
Good. Can you see me?
Yes, we can see you.
Okay, I can't
they have to
see
turn
you
the
guys,
volume
so
up a little bit.
FYI.
How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for coming on. So, were you watching the show?
I was fixing my Skype.
And you got it fixed,
I
so
was
that's
fixing
really.
my Skype and having some tequila.
Oh, there you go.
I heard just a little bit of your Pellegrino story, and that's about it.
So really, did you put Pellegrino in your tequila though?
Hells no.
No,
It's just tequila.
just tequila. No ice. No nothing.
We don't want to muddy it up or muck it up with anything else, you know?
You California girls, man.
Hey, I'm a native New Yorker.
Yeah,
I'm a
you're
Long
originally
Islander
from
at
Long
heart.
Island?
Say it again?
You're originally from Long Island?
I am. I'm from the South Shore. I don't know if you guys know where Oceanside is
Yes.
and Point Lookout.
Yes.
So I was raised in Oceanside, and then my family had a summer home in Point Lookout for a few seasons before we all moved out west.
So you moved out all together with them, and that's when you started working at Guitar. Did you work at the actual Guitar Center, or did you work somewhere that is very similar to Guitar Center?
Oh my God, no. I was the original check-in girl. I was the first girl hired at GC in Hollywood.
And that was
So-
just the original. That was the flagship store.
No, it wasn't the flagship store, but it was because it was of where it was. I mean, I think the first store was actually in San Francisco. I'm a little bit not sure on that, quite frankly, but there were, I think at the time that I came on board, there may have been 5 stores.
Okay.
So it was still sort of a quasi-family owned business at that point.
And then how old were you when that first happened?
I was really young. And actually, just to answer your other question, no, I kind of left New York. I went west when I was 17. I took off. I went to Arizona State University for college and then I finished up at Loyola later on, and I moved to California, and I was really young, so I wasn't even quite 20 at that time.
Okay. So you finished school really early.
Yeah.
Okay. So then you went out to California. You were living in LA. You were living in Hollywood. You lived in Hollywood.
No, no.
I have so
I'm
many
a bit of a
questions. I want to
snob. I'm a
know.
West Side snob, I have to say. In fact, when you read the book, there's parts of it that explain that there's a west side of Los Angeles, and then there's the Valley, and then there's Hollywood and environs. And I lived on the west side. I like the beach, so
Yeah.
I'm in Santa Monica.
Oh, okay. And you're still there.
Yeah.
Okay. So you've been there for, I mean, like, obviously you're still in your 20s. So you've been there for like 3 years, 4 years.
Right. I love you. You're my new best friend, by the way. Thank you.
You know, my friend would get very upset. I have one of my I have a best friend, but we can be like second best friends if you don't mind.
I'm good with that. That's cool.
All right, so okay, so you lived out there, and so tell us more about your book. Tell us, okay, how long did it take you to write it? What was it? Was it the intention of as a memoir, or
No,
okay.
actually, the intention wasn't as a memoir. In fact, I've come from a writing background. I got a degree in screenwriting and communication arts, and finished magna cum laude in my class, and I won the screenwriting award for my class, and I worked at HBO for a while in development, and I worked at NBC Uni as a writing consultant. And so I was always working with writers, and I gravitate more towards sci-fi.
Okay.
But this story is a personal story, and I started running the Hollywood Guitar Center alumni page. And as I was running the page, I thought, God, there's so many great stories here. And I started talking to people. And originally the book was going to be a compendium about like just all people's stories and sort of a, year by year, these are the crazy things that happened during the store, while we were in the store. And as I started to write the book, I found that it was sort of writing itself. And I had all my diaries from back then. So, I really had extensive notes in my diaries of like what concerts I went to, like the first Guns N' Roses at then Gazzari's. They were called Fargan Bastages at that time. So I had all these stories myself, and I was having trouble, truth be told, getting people to agree to sign off on the releases, to let me use their own name. So
yeah, it's so interesting.
I'm not gonna go that route. It's writing itself. It found its way. So it's kind of a coming of age. It's a year in my life at the store, and it also details my roommate's eventual mental breakdown and collapse, and a couple like a love triangle that was going on at the store. And there's a lot of celebrities mentioned, like Bruce Willis is in it, and Eddie Money, having cigarettes with Eddie Money and Eddie Van Halen, and the first and second MTV awards that ever were. Jimmy Page, meeting Jimmy Page, getting an autograph from Jimmy Page for somebody else because they were too starstruck to talk to him. All of that's in there, but it's a backdrop to what's really going on.
That's really okay. So what year? How old were you at that in this year of your life?
I was just 20. I just
so you had just moved out.
Was this was working there a job to like supplement your income for writing?
No, as a matter of fact, I was, and the book explains this. I came from a wealthy family, and at the time, our family still had a lot of money, and my job, basically, I was using my money to buy cocaine. There wasn't really, it was like a fluff job. It was like something to go to and do and hang out during the day. So while other people at the store were scrambling and there's a story in the book about these two guys at the store that are fighting over a milk carton in the refrigerator because they didn't have any milk, right? And anyway, it wasn't like that for me. Which I think maybe is one of the reasons why I have a different perspective on it. I was sort of like, that brat pack, that elite brat pack that was kind of running around Hollywood at the time, although I didn't quite know them. it wasn't that way for me. I mean, I wasn't, struggling at the time at all.
All right, so like did you have a lot of stories like as you were saying when you were putting this book together and you were having trouble getting people to sign the releases? Were you in contact with like the two people fighting over the milk carton?
Oh yeah, I mean those guys are good friends of mine. I mean those guys, I got the releases for them. I mean I would say half the people in the book gave me releases, but there were people that I couldn't get to sign off, or either they passed away or I mean, some people are gone now, but, and some people didn't want their image tainted, or they didn't want, they were jerks and they didn't want to be portrayed that way. But, that's the way life is sometimes.
What if you changed the name, though? Instead of
what?
What if you just changed the name of the person?
Well, I ended up changing the names. That's what I did.
Oh, you did? Yeah, okay. So you still told the story.
Oh, hell yeah.
Because that's all you really need to do in terms of any kind of libel or anything or slander. It's libel, right?
I believe
if you write about somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah, slander is spoken.
Yeah. So to win a libel case, like all you need to do is change your name and be like, what, they had blonde hair and this person had brown hair. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean it's
like more
obviously involved in that, but
yeah.
I mean you do have to. You have to take into consideration that it can tell the story of the person, but it can't, like what I did, for example, was I combined characters so that they were, they're together and they're not, like one character maybe have elements of three characters within them on certain people.
Okay. So explain to us, since this is more of a writer's workshop, explain to us your writing process. Like when you
Well, you know what? I have to confess, I did hear you talking about your when you like to write, and that was earlier on the show. And I have to tell you the same thing. I'm an early riser. I get up at the crack of dawn and I start writing, and nothing interferes with that. I really enjoy that time, like between 5 and 7 or 8 and 9, and I can actually write all day up until about 2 o'clock, and then I'm brain dead. I can't do it anymore. For this book, I wrote some of the story was written at the Malibu Library, which was pretty interesting because there were a lot of homeless people in there at the time, and it was like.
So you didn't flirt with any of them?
What?
You missed the section where I said when I went to library, I flirted with all the cute boys.
Wait, say it again? I didn't hear.
I said when I used to go to the library, and I probably still do this, I flirted with all the cute boys that were there. So like I never get writing done at the library because I'm like, oh, what's happening over there? So you went there.
Yeah,
so
well, there's homeless people in LA, so it's like a whole different story. But Malibu was such a dichotomy because you have this gorgeous new modern library, overlooking these beautiful gardens and shrubbery, and then you can hear the waves in the background, and then there's like Hobo Joe next to you. It's like, it's so weird, So
now, are they reading? Are they writing as well, or are they just hanging out inside the library? Like what? Like are they?
I have no idea what they're doing. I'll tell it. Truth be told, I used to go in there. I put my headphones on. I'd listen to either, like when I'm writing, depending on what I'm writing and what the character's like, I'll listen to it. So I remember I'd be listening to like Led Zeppelin or, something of that nature, and working on the book. And, I would just pretend that this was my home and I was having a party and these were some stragglers that just come in.
Oh, that's
you have some fun parties, Taylor.
Yeah, that's fun because now, Taylor, my library, we have a lot of senior citizens that come in, and I'm hoping to retire and do the same thing. Like you go to the library, they read the paper.
Yeah.
So some of them may have, a low income. They might not. They're on a fixed income. Some of them, but they go into the library and they find out about different events. You can watch. Sometimes they have revivals. Film revivals, they have people who will come and read.
Yeah.
Sometimes read from their books. So to me, the library, and you can actually get free, in our library, I don't know how it is in California, but in our library, they give free classes, computer classes, how to Skype.
How to Skype.
Yeah, they do that here too, I guess. I mean, it's funny. Your story reminds me of something. There's a little place on Montana Avenue, which is like kind of there's a couple different areas of Santa Monica where I live. Montana Avenue is like the northern
How
part
big
of
is your house, Taylor?
Pardon me?
You're like, there's a couple of different areas that I live in Santa Monica. How big is your house?
No, I said there's a couple different areas of Santa Monica.
No, I know. I'm just
and
being.
one of them is this place called Montana Avenue. It's
Okay.
like on the northernmost part of Santa Monica. And there's this little cafe called Marmalade. And I remember when I go in there every once in a while, I get a coffee or whatever and sit down, and they have these like long tables. And like you said, Benny, there are a lot of senior citizens that are living in that area, and they come in and they read the paper. Well, it's it's like a picnic table style, where it's communal, right? So
Yeah.
I'm sitting there and I look over and George Hamilton is like reading a paper. And, this is the kind of thing that happens in LA, celebrities, you're interacting with them constantly, but it was just funny. He's tanner than you could even imagine. So I had trouble, I think you'd have trouble living here because you'd be so, disconcerted by the celebrities that were sitting next to you reading the paper.
Well, be able to flirt with all the cute celebrities.
Wow.
That's just fine.
Brianna's coming to that library.
No,
Okay.
I promised myself I'd never go to LA.
I make this show about me. I hate to, but
No, you don't. Don't lie. Taylor, he's
You love
lying.
it, Benny.
He loves to make it about him.
when I do stand-up comedy, I have people, I say, when they want, how do I introduce you? I say, introduce me that I opened for Paul Simon at the old Yankee Stadium. And the
Wow.
truth was, I was peeing in the bathroom next to Paul Simon. And so I tell people we shared the bathroom, and I opened the stall for him.
Oh.
It's the joke.
Oh,
But
my
I
God.
actually, so I met Paul Simon, and I didn't even realize it was him till we were washing our hands. And my son was with me. He was like 13 years old. And all of a sudden, I noticed who it was, and I went, "Hey!" How you? My son thought I knew the guy. And then,
Oh, my
and
God.
then
I would have this, Taylor, I would have the same reaction if I was, obviously I can't, I could, but I wouldn't be sharing a urinal next to Paul Simon.
But-
but at the same time, like, I don't know, I would be like, hey, I wouldn't think I knew
I've
him.
run in at Yankee Stadium, believe it or not, outside you'll run into celebrities. And I ran into the actor Steve Schipper, who plays Bobby Bacala in The Sopranos.
Okay.
Oh,
and,
okay.
And I saw him, and I did the same thing to him, and I couldn't. And my son walks away because I embarrass him. But I'm like, "Hey!" That's all I did. I was like, "Hey!" And they look at me. He's like, Paul Simon actually ran away from me.
I would run away
Oh
from
my
you
God,
too,
that's
I
so
think.
funny. I don't often recognize the celebrities. And also, the other thing that's funny is, okay, so I'm a New Yorker. I didn't leave New York till I was 17. I grew up on the island. I'm born and bred in New York. We used to go into Manhattan all the time. And, there's a different attitude, as you guys well know, and it's a better attitude as far as I'm concerned. And when I came out to LA, I was not impressed with anybody. I would run into so many people. I talked to John Lennon's son, Julian Lennon. Yeah, like just a different kind of vibe, but you get used to it, you definitely get used to it when you're out here. They're all over the place.
So when you write it, so like basically what you're saying is that like your book is less about the celebrity culture, less about the musicians that you ran into, and more just it's your story. It's about the story that you talked about, like that you're just that being there in 20 years old, living a year in your life, and then these are your interactions that were peripheral to what you were actually living as you were living.
Exactly. Absolutely. And, and I think it's actually a better story because of it, because it's not a celebrity tell-all. It's more, like you said, they're on the periphery. These things happen to me, but they're not central to the storyline. The storyline's about a young girl coming of age, finding herself, becoming a woman, figuring out life, getting off of drugs, really trying to understand where she's coming from and why she's at that place in her life. And, ours was a tough generation in some respects. I mean, we were the quote unquote Robert Downey Jr. generation. I mean, we grew up with drugs everywhere. I mean, it was prevalent and
In the 80s,
it was expected.
In the 80s,
Well,
the
it was
cocaine
admired. I mean, cocaine. It was like when I think of the '80s, I think of Ronald Reagan and cocaine.
But cocaine was such an antisocial drug. Not that I would know this, but I have a friend
Oh, I was
great.
like, I was like, I imagine going into parties, like big parties, and it just being in a bowl on the coffee table or something.
Was it
Oh
like
yeah, no,
that?
it's not quite like that. I mean that's in movies, but it is. You're right, Benny. You're absolutely right. It
It's
is an
it.
antisocial drug. In fact, there's a line in my book that says something like,
There's a
"What a
line
great
in her
little
book.
drug. Everybody should have this drug. We should all be on it, but not any of, and nobody should be on mine." Like, in other words, you're hoarding it to yourself, you
I
know. So it is very antisocial
I was
in that
going to
respect.
yes, yeah, it is because I was going to party because after a while, once you become addicted to it, and cocaine's very, all of a sudden you don't want to share anymore.
Oh no,
You're right.
no,
You
it's
had a
not
point where you were
sharing. It's not
sharing,
like
and then you
marijuana, that's for sure. You know.
marijuana. I walked. I went to California. I was at Santa Cruz, and people were smoking. Actually, I'm in a movie theater, and a man comes over and says, "You want to get high?" And
Yeah.
he's got a joint. And I'm like, "Here in the movie theater?" I said, "No." And he went upstairs. He was the projectionist. So I knocked on the door. And I was like, "Are you the project?" "Yes, I'm the projectionist." And then I closed the door, and I had a friend who smoked with him.
Oh my God.
Wait, so
Let me
here's
just
my
tell you,
question
let me
for
tell you
you.
something that's interesting. So, and it's not in the book, but you know, so there was a period of time where I was going back and forth from, you know, LA to New York. My family was still living in New York, and I was going back visiting family and friends. And, you know, I remember distinctly doing coke in New York and thinking like, God, this is crap. And, you know, having this connection in LA that had that, you know, Escobar connection for, you know, so that coke was so clean and good and delicious. I'll tell you, this is a true story. So I don't know anybody who takes coke into Mexico, but I did. Okay. Like, I was on a trip to Mexico and I was like, well, I definitely want to keep my coke with me, you know, and I ended up bringing cocaine into Mexico. Who does that?
I mean, if you could still do it, why not? You know, if you have a good supply, why not just go for it?
I mean,
But like,
Now it gets
instead
cut
of
with so
buying,
much crap that you're not even doing cocaine. Who knows what you're
who
doing?
knows what you're
You're
doing
doing
there,
concrete and maybe rat poison.
and yeah,
yeah,
poison.
I know. It is, you know, that is something to definitely consider. In fact, that was one of the reasons why I, you know, got off of drugs in the first place. Is you really, you know, one of the things that really bothered me was the cartel connection and, you know, where is this coming from? What is going on with this? Who is having ill effects because I'm doing this? You know.
Wouldn't that be nice if
Well,
people actually thought about that now with the heroin epidemic that we have raging across America?
oh yeah, it's horrible.
It's
And my book touches briefly on that. It touches on the fact that, like, you know, some of the guys coming into the store, you could tell they had this like amorphous high, this glassy kind of weird high that was not like coke, and they were doing heroin, and I never got into that, fortunately. And you know, unfortunately, I wasn't into coke for very long, which was great. But and the book talks about that too. So
That sounds very. I mean, it's a good thing that, you know, now with your book, and are you using it anyway to raise awareness to any drug issues, any addiction issues, or anything else like that? Like, are
well,
you
I
just
think
looking to tell a story and continue to be a writer because that's your job in the world, is to tell stories and to be a writer, or are you using it to propel awareness and raise awareness as well?
you know, here's the thing. I hate when books have messages. Like, it drives me nuts. It's not, you know, if somebody gleans from the book that drugs are bad, great. Then fantastic. But at its heart, it's a story.
No.
You know, it's a coming of age. I mean, the book's been compared to uh, Less Than Zero, and also to Jay McInerney's Bright Lights, Big City, which,
Oh,
you know,
okay,
wow,
yes.
I'm beyond thrilled. And I have a producer looking at it right now, trying to decide if we're going to do a spin for a Netflix series and see if we're going to pitch that. It's getting a lot of attention, which is great. And it's opening a lot of doors for me, which is fantastic. I mean, I'm thrilled. I've got a bookstore in LA, a really kind of bookstore that I guess I can mention it. It's a Diesel bookstore in Brentwood that's now carrying the book, and they are, as far as I'm concerned, one of the best independent bookstores on the West Side, and they've already sold out of the product. so to
Great.
bring them more. So
That's great. And you're on it. The book is on Amazon.com. We have to
it's on
wrap it.
Amazon. It's on Indie Bound, I think. I can't remember.
We're showing the cover right
IndieBound.org,
now.
I think is the other site it's on.
We're
You
showing
can
the
get it
cover
off
as
of
we
my
speak.
website, taylorvanarsdale.com. And I would, and I didn't know if we were going to if you wanted me to do a little reading, a little blurb of it or something, but I'm happy to do that.
We ran out of time because we have to wrap up early because another show is coming.
Oh, bummer.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. This is our first show on this new time slot too. So,
Okay.
but we'll have you back. We'll have you and Taylor Van Arsdale, everyone. Great guest. The book is Cocaine to Bane, as we just showed the cover. And they can go to your website. It's great. Find out. I wanted to talk to you about because I'm a science fiction fan as well. So
Nice.
there was so much I wanted to talk to you about, and I'm happy you called, and I'm happy we got to interview you as much as we did. Thank you, and we'll be in touch.
Thank
We'll
you,
do
Benny.
lunch.
Thank you. It's Brianna, right?
Yes, Taylor.
Lovely to meet you. Thank you so much for
Lovely to
having me
meet
on.
you
And
too.
please have me back. I'll do a reading on the air for you guys.
That'd be awesome. That would be so
Yes.
cool.
Thank you, Taylor. Take
Thank
care.
you. Bye.
Bye, Taylor.
Bye.
Bye.
So,
Yeah, that sounds really interesting, guys. If you have an interest in the 80s and in music and also a coming of age, really what it comes down to is what Taylor said. It's a coming of age. It's a story about all of her experiences, but really what it is like to be 20 in the 80s and moving somewhere far, far away from home and finding a home there. Or not finding a home there and struggling to find that
and
home.
the 80s is a very popular topic. People
mean-
they like to know about the 80s. They make films about the 80s. It's I think a popular topic.
Yeah, because we romanticize it as if it was this, as if we didn't still live during, the the Cold War,
You're right.
which is still happening.
Just differently now.
Yeah, it's just kind of warm now. It's like lukewarm, tepid.
The lukewarm war.
Yeah, it's hot in a lot of places too.
Yeah.
It's gonna get even hotter really soon. Thank you.
But I think Taylor's book and your book, I think would make good Christmas presents because books make great Christmas presents.
I'm going to start with the fact that if you're going to go shopping on Black Friday or Cyber Monday, by all means, shop on Amazon. Shop on Amazon and get a book. And also,
Yeah.
if you're not going out and shopping, which is really the good choice in all the matter, just pick up one of our books
Yeah.
and read them and stay home and enjoy the winter, because that's what the winter is made for, and not to be out and crazy and doing all this other stuff, but to actually settle in and enjoy the season.
And actually pick up a book. Pick up a book, sit back and read the book and get away from the electric screen.
Yeah, exactly.
just read.
I mean, if Kindle works for you, obviously, I know that I just made Mosaic available on Kindle, and for this week, it's $2.99. So.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, because you know what it is? I wrote a book. I would love for people to read it. I wrote it because I want people to read it.
Yes.
And also because I love to write. But, it's like, why make it where it's expensive where you're like, oh, I'm not going to buy that. I'm going to be deterred. If I see a book that's over $30 and it's like, if it's not a textbook, it's not saying that they're not worth reading, because they're absolutely worth reading for the most part.
Right.
But at the same time, I want books to be accessible to everybody. Like you said, going to the library, all these people that go to the library.
Yeah.
By all means, go to the library, pick up a book, sit there.
And if you
read
like
it.
the book, I've went to the library and read books that I like so much that I bought.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and that's my form of materialism. I get books and I put them on a shelf. I'm like, damn, looks good.
Yeah, and I'm the type of guy. We have to wrap up. I'm the type of guy that sometimes a book will sit for quite a while on my shelf before I pick it up.
Yeah, I did that. I went away and then I came back and I'm looking at all my books on my shelf and I'm like, ooh, I'm gonna read this one next. Ooh, I'm gonna read this one next. And I'm looking at and I have so much to look forward to because I have so many books that I haven't visited yet and I can't wait to spend time with. So
Right,
there's
and
another reason, as a writer, read, because that is what's going to say, ooh, I like what they did there, and be like, oh shoot, that's terrible. I hate what they did there. And so that way you really are able to develop your own voice and say what you can, where writers have failed for you and where writers have succeeded, and where you want to find that middle ground of where you can be your own writer.
Some great technique.
Yes.
Sometimes you'll read some things that the technique is amazing.
Exactly.
There was a book I read about animals, and each chapter was the animal in the first person.
Yeah.
So it was like the hyena, and a rat, and it was called Dr. Rat by William Kotzwinkle, and it was like I the hyena laughed nervously. Anyway, I the old man with
and I'm the young woman. Am I a young woman? Yeah, the young woman.
The young. Yeah, I got to be careful what you say nowadays, but the young, beautiful Brianna Gervat.
And the young, handsome Benny Rotuzzi.
Thank you for watching. Right to Speak. We'll be back next week,
yes.
same time.
Same place.
Strong Island Radio and Television.com.
Yes.
Thank you for watching. Take care now.
Thank you.
Thanks. Hey, that was great.